So we'll go ahead and get started here. Just to give you a quick introduction, my name's Matt Knuckles, and I'm just going to give you a quick bio, just so you know who I am and my whole intentions for giving this webinar. So back in 2002, I read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad. After reading that book, I also read Cash Flow Quadrant. If you haven't read those yet, they're both by Robert Kiyosaki. I would highly recommend those. But I knew two things after reading that. I knew that I wanted to invest in real estate, and I knew that I wanted to own a business. So I got into the mortgage business back in 2003 with a company named Community Trust Funding. And then from 2003 to 2006, I really studied real estate investing from that whole time, and I hadn't even bought a property. So I finally bought my first property in 2006. And then after 2006, I just continued to buy properties. I opened up Denver Lending in 2009. In 2010, I became a financial planner. And then in 2014, I completed a real estate development, sold that each side for a total of 1.2 million. And then I'm currently investing in a 48-unit townhome. I had built up to owning and managing 12 properties, and then I had reached my cash flow goal of $8,000 a month. And then Denver Lending, which is the mortgage company that I had started back in 2009, in the last 6 years, my team and I have funded about 168 million in loan volume. And my team and I are one of the largest mortgage teams here in the Denver area. But my whole mission of giving this class is to help coach other people to become financially free so that they can make the impact in the world that they were meant to make. I believe everybody has a purpose, and I believe that they have a passion. And I believe that real estate's one of those things that can help you unlock your passion and your purpose so that you can just focus on that and have the money that is needed for you to live the lifestyle that you want while you're able to live the passion that you want. So what I wanted to kind of start off with is having you think about what is the monthly cash flow that you'd like to generate on a monthly basis. So basically cash flow would just be the amount of money that you get paid on a rental property between what you owe and what the rent is. So I've had all sorts of answers from $300 to $500. Some people just want to have, about $500 so that their car payment's covered, or they want to have $3,000. I had one great example of one of the clients that I was working with wanted to have the ability to have his wife stop working by the time that they had a baby. So he was able to accomplish that $3,000 goal, 6,000, 10,000. And then really writing in why do you want that cash flow is that if you're not putting a why to it, there's very little chance that you'll end up taking action. And if that why is not strong enough, you just won't take action. So I'll take a minute here just to let you guys write down what is the cash flow that you want to generate. And I have had business coaches that always encourage to go ahead and write with the Mickey Mouse crayon. And what they meant by that was that you don't need to know all the steps to get to that cash flow, but you want to be knowing what is that cash flow that you want to generate. And then we'll take the next few steps and then keep growing after that. So hopefully that gave you time to write down a number in regards to the cash flow that you want to earn. So what I'm going to share with you today are the 3 strategies that I use to build my real estate portfolio. So the first strategy that I used was called the 5 and 10. So basically what I was doing is I was purchasing a new home as a primary residence every 2 years for a 10-year period. And I would rent out the previous residence at or above the mortgage, allowing others to build the wealth for me. The most important thing is the monthly income from the investment is that you want to be creating cash flow on a monthly basis. The second most important thing is the principal reduction. So somebody else is paying that mortgage down that basically is going to help you build your net worth. Depreciation is going to be allow you to have most of that cash flow tax-free, using that depreciation to offset the cash flow. And then appreciation, not what that home's worth today, but what is that home worth 20, 30, 40 years from now. So what I always tell people in the 5 and 10 template is that this is just a template. So go ahead and customize this for you. So if you want to buy 2 houses in 10 years, I think that you're going to be better off than if you just bought 1. And if you wanted to buy 10 houses in 10 years, that is actually allowed through the guidelines. It would be, more of an aggressive strategy, but you do have the ability to purchase a primary residence every 12 months within Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac guidelines. So it is allowed. The key advantage when you're buying homes as a primary residence is the low down payment. So basically you're moving into each house, and each house that you move into, you can put down the low down payment. What I really love about this strategy is that it doesn't take a ton of money in the bank, is that we have clients that will buy their first home, using a down payment assistance programs, with some of the down payment assistance programs that'll allow you to buy a house with as little as $1,000 down. If the seller's paying the closing costs, you can truly come to the closing with $1,000. Granted, if you buy with a down payment assistance program and you haven't been able to save much money, you might not be buying on this quick a schedule. But if you were to evaluate it every 6 months, and continue to save money towards your second purchase, then on your second purchase, then you're utilizing your savings plus possibly equity from the first house to help you get into the second house. But the main thing I want you to get out of this is that you don't have to stick to the template of 5 and 10. It really was just a template that we put together. But there isn't, an exact strategy to this, that you could be buying 2 houses in 10 years, 10 in 10 years, or 3 houses in 10 years. The biggest thing I want people to do is basically just have a plan. Is that I want people to think of real estate like chess. And I think if you're thinking about real estate like chess and you're moving 2 to 3 houses, or thinking about moves 2 to 3 in advance, I think that you're going to be much better financially 30 years from now than if you just bought 1 house. Any questions? There's a question here about thoughts on tax changes regarding mortgage interest. Will it make a big impact for this plan? Not really. So the tax, again, consult your CPA, as I'm not a tax advisor, but from what I understand is that as a rental, your tax interest is going to go onto your Schedule E, and 100% of that tax, or 100% of that interest is tax deductible. So once you convert it to an investment property, I don't think that the new tax changes are affecting investment properties in the way that is taxed. Again, I'm not a CPA, so you'll have to consult your CPA on that, but I don't foresee that. A lot of people also have questions on whether or not, the 2 years is to end up selling the properties. My strategy is to retain the property for the next 20, 30, 40 years, so I'm not really looking at the capital gains tax changes either. Any other questions? So on this next slide, I just want to give some rough numbers of what this plan could look like. So if you were to purchase 5 $350,000 properties over a 10-year period, that would create a $1.7 million real estate portfolio in addition to your retirement savings. At the 40th year, the 5th house would be paid off, and you'd actually have a debt-free portfolio. And if we assume 2% annual appreciation, the net worth of that real estate portfolio is going to be 3.5. Does anybody know what the actual historical appreciation rate is for homes? The historical appreciation is actually closer to 6%. So we use 2 on purpose just to not try to, bake in a ton of appreciation to make this plan work. But basically, if you have, if you get this 2% appreciation, you're basically going to be sitting pretty, assuming you put those all on 30-year fix and let the renters pay off all the 4 houses, and then you'd be living in the 5th house. So if you're doing this in your 30s, the properties will begin paying off in your 60s. So one of the most ideal times to do this is in your 30s. But I have clients that, have said, hey, Matt, I wish I would have met you 30 years ago. I'm 60. Is this too late for me? But then I usually ask them, what's the average age of life expectancy? And the average age of life expectancy is actually 85. So if you bought a home in your 60s, you have another 25 years of runway. So one of the reasons that this plan makes so much sense to me is I look at my parents buying homes 40 years ago. For my dad bought a home before I was born at 30,000, then bought the home right next door for 35,000. My mom bought a home over near Cook Park for 80,000, and then another home out in Littleton for 180,000. Today, all those homes are worth over $450,000 each, and they'd have a $1.8 million real estate portfolio if they would have retained those properties and they were thinking strategically of real estate as a wealth building vehicle. So that's the main thing from this strategy, is just to start thinking of real estate as a wealth building vehicle and to retain a few properties. We did an exercise with our team as if you owned three $450,000 properties, retain those for 30 years. The value of those at 2% would be worth $2.2 million. So I don't think you need a ton of properties in order to be able to have a nice retirement leg. So, just owning 3 properties would probably work, assuming a 2% appreciation. At 6% appreciation, those properties at 450,000 would be worth 7.7 million. So a really nice, retirement leg for people. Could be sufficient to retire on just your own, and not, do any other retirement vehicles. Any questions? Okay, we'll keep moving on. So that was the first strategy that I used. I actually moved 6 times in 8 years to retain half of the properties that I own. So 6 out of the 12 houses I actually lived in to basically build my real estate portfolio. So the second strategy, moving on, if we want to talk rates of return, if you ask a financial planner what's a good rate of return in the stock market, what is a typical number that a financial planner would say? So when I was doing financial planning, we used to say that the historical stock market average was 8%. So a lot of times, if you've had a plan built for you, is that if you save X amount of money over X amount of time and you get X rate of return, typically was 8%, you're going to have X amount of money at the end of retirement. Does anybody know what the average investor's actually gotten over the last 15 years? The average investor has actually gotten a 3% rate of return rather than an 8% rate of return. And when I was doing financial planning, what we used to help people with is understanding how to read your statement. And I think it's important that you understand what is an average rate of return. So we used to give the example is that if you put $1 into the market and the first year it goes up at 100%, you have $2. And then the second year it goes down by 50%, you're back down to $1, and then the third year it goes up at 100% again, so you're back to $2, and then the fourth year it goes down by 50%, you're back down to $1. But what was your average rate of return that would be showing on the statement? Typically, the average rate of return on the statement is going to show at 25%, so you'd average 100% minus 50, 100% minus 50 is going to be a 25% average rate of return, even though your internal rate of return, or what you actually realized, was only still $1. So your internal rate of return was 0, but the average rate of return that you're getting on the statement is 25%. And after I got my Series 7, I've watched my accounts go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down, and they'll show an average rate of return about 10 to 15%. But yet the money that I had in there really hasn't compounded like I've wanted to see. So one of the greatest miracles in the world, I'll kind of zoom this in a little bit so that you can see this a little bit better. But what this is basically showing you that if you were to put $10,000 into an account and it was to grow at 3%, and then the middle column is going to be growing at 8%, and then the third column is going to be growing at 15%, and then we look at if you let those compound at 10% or at those different amounts over 30 years, what would you have? So the $10,000 compounding at 3% would grow to $24,000. $10,000 compounding at 8% would grow to $100,000, and then the $10,000 compounding at 15% would actually grow to $662,000. When I first saw this, I was blown away. It was definitely staggering to see that $10,000 could actually grow to $662,000. So if we look at what the average investor has gotten in rates of return over the last 15 years, has been 3%. And you had a financial plan built for you, assuming 8% due to historical is that you would be expecting to have $100,000 at the time of retirement. But there's a massive problem going on right now is that average investor actually has $24,000, not $100,000. So the statistics are showing that 96% of people will not be able to retire on assets, and there's only going to be as little as 4% of people that are going to be able to retire on assets. So a lot of people are seeking alternatives. Is that the biggest problem isn't the rate of return. The biggest problem is that people aren't saving enough money, but there's also the problem of not getting the rate of return that you were planning on when you built your financial plan or your financial pro forma. And then if we look at this chart, you get to actually see one of the greatest miracles in the world, and actually see that compound interest curve start to work when you're hitting a 15% cash on or compounding interest versus 8%. You're definitely seeing that grow, but just not hitting that exponential curve. So for strategy number 2 is I teach how I evaluated investment properties. I actually used to go to an investment group, and the gentleman that used to lead that investment group was a former engineer and probably one of the smartest guys that I've ever met and been coached by in regards to investing in real estate. And he actually was the one that taught cash on cash return. So I've basically adopted that back when I was investing, and still use it today. But I think it's one of the most simple ways to evaluate a property. So you just take gross rents, you minus the mortgage, and that's going to be your cash flow. You want to take your annual cash flow divided by the cash into the deal, and that's going to be your cash on cash return. So this second strategy is going to be more geared towards somebody that has some money in the bank. That first strategy is going to be kind of geared towards people that might not have as much money in the bank, but they still want to be, investing in real estate. So when I look at formulas in words, it makes no sense to me. So let's just look at this on more of a practical basis of if you bought a $300,000 property, gross rents would be about $1,900. A mortgage on that for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance would be about $1,500, and your monthly cash flow would be about $400. If you times that by 12, it's going to be $4,800 for your annual cash flow. If that purchase price was $300,000, most people are going to put 20% down. You can put as little as 15% down, but most of the clients that we work with are putting at least 20% down to avoid mortgage insurance on an investment property. On a primary residence, most clients, are putting less than 20% down on a primary residence. If you take your annual cash flow divided by the cash into the deal, that's going to give you an 8% cash on cash return. So that is usually about the limit that I would recommend buying a investment property at, is about that 8%. So I usually say that that's a good place to start, is looking at cash on cash returns of 8% or higher. We have an Excel sheet where you just have to plug and play a few numbers, and it helps guide you through the numbers that you have to input. So if you'd like a copy of that, definitely shoot me an email or reach out to our office and we can get you a copy of that. So if we combine strategy number 1 with strategy number 1 was buying as a primary residence, strategy number 2 is understanding cash on cash return. So if you take the gross rents of assuming you bought a $350,000 property, what we always tell people, if you're doing that 5 and 10 and buying them as primary residence, not that you're renting it out right away, but we always educate them to know what you would be able to rent it out for today. So typically a $350,000 property is going to rent for around $2,200. If you minus the mortgage, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance would be about $1,882. That monthly cash flow would be $318. If you times that by 12 months, your annual cash flow is going to be $3,816. On a $350,000 purchase, if you put 5% down because it's the primary residence, would be $17,500. Add your closing costs to that, you're going to be looking at about $22,000 at closing. So the $3,816 divided by the $22,500 is a 17% annual cash on cash return. So for me, after being a financial planner for 3 years, I've had a hard time finding compound interest and really getting an investment to work for me, besides real estate. So real estate has been the vehicle that's really done fantastic things for me financially, and that's why I'm so excited to help other people with it. Is that with the financial planning is that you definitely make things work, but I don't think that you can build wealth as well as you can in real estate. So at this point in the class, if it's a live class, I'm usually asking how many people here would be excited to find a 17% cash on cash return. And if you want to make a comment now or throw that into the chat, you're welcome to, or any questions that you have. So cash on cash return is really important to understand, and then also understanding depreciation. So if you have a $350,000 purchase would be the home value. In order to calculate depreciation, you would minus out the land value. We just threw in 100,000, but if you actually go to the county assessor's website, you can figure out what that land value was at the time of purchase. And then you take the building value and divide by 27.5 years. So if with that 27.5 years, you're going to have an annual depreciation expense of $9,000. And that $9,000 is more of like a paper loss that goes on your Schedule E on your tax returns. So when let's just say on a property that was cash flowing $500 a month, that's cash flowing $6,000 annually. That $6,000 would show as profit on your tax returns, but then this depreciation gets input as a paper loss. So you would actually be showing on your tax returns that you lost $9,000. So in that example, that $6,000 of cash flow was not taxed. And in addition to that, you get to write off an additional $3,000 towards your taxable income. So the question I get most frequently is, should I be buying investment properties inside my IRA? And in most cases, my answer to that is no. And the reason for that is that because of this depreciation, you're already buying a tax-favored asset. So why would you put it into the IRA and let the IRS and the government tell you when you can take the cash flow on that property? Or let's say you sold that property, you can't touch that cash flow until you're 90 or 59 and a half. There's some instances when I think that buying it inside of a Roth is okay. So a Roth is basically buying it and the taxes, it's coming out tax-free, versus just an IRA is you're going to get taxed when it's coming out. So that's the main reason I don't like it inside of an IRA. Inside a Roth, I think it's okay. But again, if you're buying properties in your 30s, 40s, and maybe even early 50s, do you want to wait to be able to touch that cash flow and possible sale of that property until you're 59 and a half without, further tax implications? So that's the main reason I don't recommend buying inside of an IRA. But understanding depreciation is awesome because you can understand that the cash flow that you're taking in is typically not taxed. Any questions? So at this point, most people are asking, well, in the cash on cash, why are you not factoring in vacancy and maintenance? So what I had to end up going to do, this slide used to not have any numbers in it. I used to just say that based on being an experienced real estate investor, I know that principal reduction and appreciation are going to outweigh vacancy and maintenance. But I had another gentleman that coaches people on how to invest in real estate kind of tell me what their formula was. I didn't really agree with their formula because what it did is it took out property management, it took out vacancy, it took out maintenance, it took out future home improvements, but it didn't add back principal and it didn't add back appreciation. So I think that, it was setting up, if you're going to use all the numbers, might as well use all the numbers. So what I ended up doing on this slide is if you want to start using all the numbers, you can. Vacancy is going to be about 5% and maintenance is going to be about 5%. So you'd be looking at about a $2,600 vacancy and maintenance. And on the left-hand side, you'd want to consider principal reduction. In the first year, you'd get $5,855, and that's going to grow every year after that. And assuming appreciation, I just used 5%. The Denver market since 2012 has been appreciating at 10%, but I would rather use a historical average of appreciation, and 5% is a great number to use. So if you assume 5% appreciation on a $350,000 home, your net worth increase is going to be $23,355 versus the vacancy and maintenance of $2,640. So if we want to start including all of the numbers, let's do that. But what cash on cash return, when it was introduced to me by the investment coach, is that this guy was probably one of the most, like I said, he was a former engineer, a spreadsheet nerd, had the spreadsheets to put in all these inputs. but in today's market, you have to be able to evaluate a property quick. So cash on cash return is how much cash should I put in it and how much cash is it going to give me on an annual basis? And you got to make a quick decision. So rather than forecasting incorrect vacancy, incorrect maintenance, trying to figure out principal, trying to figure out appreciation, if you measure each property, one property cash on cash return is 3%, the other property's cash on cash of 15, which one are you going to want to buy? Assuming, the property B doesn't have some deferred maintenance, you would just have to include that into your cash into that deal. Any questions here? So that is strategy number 2. We're moving along at a good clip, as in our webinar classes, there's not as many questions as in our live classes. But the third and final strategy is going to be a fix and hold strategy. I'll give the disclaimer is that this strategy is not really geared for a first-time home buyer, and it's not really geared towards somebody that doesn't have access to a good contractor, because contractors are definitely harder to come by in today's market, especially in Denver. If you're doing this in another city and you have access to a good contractor, this could be more applicable, but it is a harder strategy to do without a good contractor. But on the left-hand side, what it is it's showing you the acquisition of a property. So an acquisition is assuming a $300,000 purchase, that you have $75,000 worth of fix-up to do, and so that you're going to be into that property for $375,000. In the middle here is going to be your construction time frame, so assuming about 90 to 120 days, depending on the contractor that you're working with. And then the right-hand side is going to be putting together your permanent financing. So on the left-hand side in that acquisition is that you're going to be getting a construction loan of some type, and then on the right-hand side, you're going to be putting that into long-term financing. So it's a fix and hold rather than a fix and flip. So in a fix and hold, obviously, you've popped the value. So in this example, you've popped the value to $450,000, giving you an after repair value of $450,000. And you'll hear more experienced investors use the term ARV. So if you take that ARV and times it by 75%, the long-term financing that we would be able to do would be $337,500. So if you were into that deal for $375,000, you're going to have to basically get back out of that construction loan. So in this example, that we're able to retain this property for $37,500. So on the left-hand side, if you're taking notes, there's 3 ways to get that construction loan. So you want somebody to lend you that $375,000, and the best way to get that is going to be private financing, better known as friends and family. So who do you know that would be willing to lend you $375,000? It would be secured by the property, but there are great examples of somebody that might have a large equity line of credit, somebody that has a large retirement account that's not doing very well, somebody that might have money in savings that's getting a 0% rate of return. And I've seen all sorts of different terms negotiated from 4% all the way to 10%. And with private financing, hopefully you're able to put that together without paying points. And points is a percentage of the loan amount. So 1 point would be paying $37,000 or $3,700. If you don't have access to private financing, we have a lender that we can refer you to that would lend you the $375,000, and they require 10% down on an investment property. So 10% down on an investment property is unique, and for that they charge a 10% rate and 2 points. So 2 points will be 2% of that loan amount, and a lot of people will balk at that 10% rate. With that, then you might want to move back to private financing or try to move to bank financing. So bank construction loans is typically going to be about 20% down. So of that $375,000, you'd be putting 20% down of that. And then the fourth and final option, if you're taking notes, is hard money, to where you wouldn't have to put any of that $375,000 down, and lenders will lend that at about 14 to 15% rate, and they will usually lend with 4 to 5 points. So pretty much all of the clients that I work with don't use hard money unless they're a really sophisticated investor and they have a ton of money in the bank and they just choose not to use their money. I really only had one client of mine that was using hard money, and that was because he was doing about 15 properties at a time. So he had hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, but it was using hard money in order to be able to do as many properties as he had. So if you were to buy this property in the traditional sense as an investment property, you're going to put 20% down on the 300,000, which would be 60,000, and then you're going to be coming to closing with your own fix-up cost, which is going to be another 75,000. So in that deal, you'd be, having 135,000 tied up into one house, versus if you're structuring it with a construction loan and then takeout financing, that allows you to put less cash into the deal, which could be as low as 37,500 in this example. Any questions? Awesome. Well, we're flying through today. Like I said, webinars usually go a lot quicker than the live classes. So action steps from here is I do have to say is that I think, after seeing these 3 strategies, hopefully you're thinking, wow, this is simple. But what I've come to realize is that 80% of life and business and investing is all psychology, and 20% is tactics. So the biggest thing that you can do from this point is overcome fear, because if you're like most people, the brain actually 65% of the time is figuring out what's wrong, what could go wrong, what are the problems, what are the pitfalls. There definitely is risk. There is no such thing as investing without risk, and we can talk about what those risks would be. I think, because I'm a long-range investor, if values go down, it doesn't really matter. I had one client say, what are values going to be in 5 years? I don't know. You don't know. So if values go down, I'm not really concerned, because I'm looking at this as a 20 to 30 to 40 year investment. So I would let that property ride. One of the concerns could be, what happens if rents go down? What happens if this house is just sitting vacant? And unless a bunch of people pick up and move out of Denver, I don't foresee, long periods of vacancy. Could rents come down? That definitely could be possible. So that's why you want to have that cash flow, to have a buffer that if you need to discount rents 10 to 20%, that's not going to be the end of your world. But, rents could adjust. But forecasts are showing that, people are moving to Denver in droves. They're forecasting 50,000 people per year. Last year there was 89,000 people that moved to Denver. So rents adjusting in the near future, I personally don't foresee that. But again, your guess is as good as mine. If I was, in the business of forecasting things, I'd be sitting on the beach somewhere and not working if I had the crystal ball. So what you really have to do is just battle with your own psychology. Is that it's going to be more your psychology than the tactics on making steps to actually build a real estate portfolio. So the next steps here are to know your numbers. So 10 to 15 minute phone call with one of the loan experts here at Denver Lending. And the information that we'll be gathering is employment history, your residential history, your income, and your assets. Pretty simple stuff. That's a 10 to 15 minute phone call. And then what we're going to do is that we're going to make a game plan. So again, real estate investing is like playing chess. You need to be thinking about 2 to 3 moves ahead. So we will sit down with you for free with a 1 hour free consultation with Denver Lending and your realtor. The main thing I would say about a realtor is that you don't want to be working with an agent that has not invested themselves. It's kind of like buying a stock from a stockbroker that hasn't bought that stock. So I would say that if you would like, we have agents that specialize in your area that can help you invest and that have helped other people invest, and they've invested themselves. And I think it's very important to be working with an agent that has invested themselves in real estate. And then third step is start looking for properties and understand how to calculate cash on cash return. And after we meet with you for that 1 hour free consultation, we'll also help you calculate cash on cash return. You and your real estate agent would need to determine what you think you might be able to rent it for. We'll help you with what the future mortgage payment would be, and then we'll also help you with how much cash you need to put into that deal. So basically just understanding that cash on cash return. So pretty simple, but again, fear is going to be the number one thing to battle. I think the tactics are very simple, and I think I was able to build my real estate portfolio with using these 3 strategies and it definitely isn't rocket science. Definitely read a lot of books and got as much education as I could. But I think the thing that holds most people back is going to be fear. So if I could give you a recommendation, I would say to go ahead and call our office as soon as you have time, and plan on a 10 to 15-minute phone conversation. You can call our office at the 303-945-3962, and you'll be able to speak to one of our loan experts, and they will walk you through the information that we need. Again, that's the simple information, employment and residential history for the last 2 years, and then information in regards to your income and assets. And then from there, we'll set up that face-to-face, educate you on what options are available to you. Those options will be customized to you. I've had clients after this call into the office and ask, hey, we'd like to set up a face-to-face and talk about our options, but we don't want to give you any of our personal information. Unfortunately, that doesn't work, just for the fact it's like calling a car mechanic and saying, hey, my car's making this vrr noise, and we want you to fix the car, and we want to know how much it's going to cost. Unfortunately, no mechanic would be able to tell you, what's the problem with your car and how to fix it. Same thing is that if we're going to help you finance and build a real estate portfolio, unfortunately, we do have to pull credit, and we do have to get your income. We do have to get your assets. But the fantastic thing is that we're going to sit down with you for an hour, and if you don't like what the numbers look like, and you're not feeling comfortable with investing, you can walk away and not have any money out of pocket. So it's a really great way to kick the tires and speak with pros on actually building your real estate portfolio. And if those numbers don't work or it doesn't sit right, then you can walk away. So there's no money invested. But the big thing that you'll need to do from here is basically just schedule your face-to-face and do that 10 to 15-minute call. So the law of diminishing returns is that if you don't call right now, the chances of you calling will diminish every minute that you wait. So if you wait to call, the chances of you calling will be low. I appreciate everyone's time. If there's any last questions, I'd love to be able to field those now. If anybody has any last questions, I would definitely love to field those. But if you don't have any questions, I'd love for you guys to go ahead and call our office, and we'd love to sit down with you and see how we can help you start to grow your real estate portfolio. Thank you very much. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks, man. That was great.